Welcome into Nebrasketball Brunch Show. It is Friday, February 14th, Valentine's Day.
Ooh.
Love is in the air. And if you're a Nebraska basketball fan, also sadness. Glad to have you with us. I'm Jack Mitchell. That is Caleb Henry of Husker Max. And please, and thank you for joining us. And please, if you will, like and subscribe to the YouTube page that you've joined us on. We would love to have you do that. Just, if nothing else, to support us and so we can keep on doing this because we enjoy doing it. We'd like to keep doing it.
Yeah.
All right, Caleb, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago that we were talking about this, just 12 hours ago or so. We had a short show for after Nebrasketball, though, and so I think we can spend a little bit of time. Let's do our tourney confidence rankings to start things out because I know people want to know those. Then we'll go into the Maryland game a little bit more, and then let's talk about what it all means going forward and look ahead a little bit. But yeah, let's start tourney confidence rankings. Last time, 1 week ago, Nebraska had won 3 in a row, had Ohio State coming up. They then took out Ohio State, got that victory, and then, of course, now have lost to Maryland. So what exactly does a 1-1 week for Nebrasketball do in terms of your confidence?
Right. And I was at an 8 last week, and you were at a 5.5.
Okay.
If I'm reading the old old graph from DPM correctly.
DPM. If we didn't have DPM doing that, I don't know how we would. We really probably should have started our own next year when we do this. We will start our own spreadsheet at the beginning of the year. But I always start this segment. I'm like, I don't remember what I did last week, but that's always very helpful.
That's why I looked it up.
Big shout out to David for doing that for us. So yeah, so you were up there. I'll be interested to see how much and even which way you go after that, Caleb. You can go ahead and start. Let me know.
So I'm going to stay at an 8. I'm actually unmoved this week. Had there not been the Bearcay injury, and then who knows what the result would have been last night. So we're kind of wait and see on what that's going to do over this last stretch of games. Had there not been the Bearcay injury, even with a loss last night, I may have gone up because of how this team is trending and the way the rest of the bubble is trending. The Bearcay injury plus the loss last night has me staying patted at an 8.0.
All right. Taking into account, obviously, got the Ohio State win and the Maryland loss, what the rest of the schedule is, what Nebraska needs, I think, which is still, I think 20 wins. That's kind of the number I'm always kind of evaluating what the likelihood is that they can get to 20 wins. And then given that their remaining games, as we'll talk about later, are Northwestern away, Penn State away, Michigan home, Minnesota home, Ohio State away, Iowa at home. Man, I will say I'll go up just a little. I'll go up to 6.
Okay.
I will go up to 6, actually, even after coming off a loss. I don't know if that's ever happened that we went up in a week after a loss, but I feel better now still than I did 1 week ago.
What's more of the reason besides just feeling better? The team went 1-1. You have the Bearcay injury. Is it because of the way the bubble's playing out? Is it because we look at all of the bracketologists and the number remains really high? Where is it for you?
I think a part of it is, when you look at still what the odds that the analytics guys give us, guys and gals, I don't know if they're gals, but Torvik has it at 73%. Team ranking still has it at 82%. Yeah. So they're more in line with your numbers than my numbers right now. And, for me, that Ohio State win was good in 2 ways. Not only got Nebraska a quad 1 win at home where they looked, really, really good. Ohio State is kind of, if there's going to be another team above them that ends up on the bubble, it's going to be Ohio State as well. And I haven't looked a lot at the bubble this week. We can delve into that a little bit here later in the show. But
I've got several tabs pulled up.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got on that. And then I guess the other thing is, and this is a little foreshadowing of what we're about to talk about, while the Maryland loss obviously was not a a moment where they gained something where they could have really, I mean, I think our numbers would have been really crazy had they won that game. But it also, because of the circumstances around it, not only is it not a bad loss, it's a quad one loss. I think Maryland is probably going to look better and better as this year goes on. But I also think the circumstances with Nebraska, having Berke out, having two players that I don't think looked themselves, that they needed.
They were sick, yeah.
And Maryland just playing just an unbelievable offensive game as I continue to think about it. And part of that was about Nebraska's defense, but part of it was just they're
dudes.
They're a good team, and especially now that some of their young guys are getting a little bit more experienced. Yeah. So I was all in all, that doesn't discourage me. That really doesn't change how I look, Caleb, at the last 6 games compared to what I did, or I guess is it 6? Yeah, 6 games compared to where I was before that game started. So
I think this is the most either of us has just been unmoved by a loss on the season.
Yeah,
because obviously during that stretch of 6 games, it was like, oh, it was just compounding and compounding. You go back to the Michigan State loss where I was losing my mind in here of how bad that was. Mm-hmm. Even the St. Mary's loss was just like, oh, that's one you would have liked to have out of your 3 things you wanted in the non-con, and you didn't get that one, and it's neutral site, and ultimately St. Mary's doesn't look that bad out there on the West Coast. This is, I think for both of us, we're just really unmoved by the way it played out because of the circumstances, because of the way the team had been trending prior to that with 4 straight wins. And like you said, Maryland had been on a tear. They had been on a tear of late, especially since the last time those 2 teams played. And you've got young guys. You have Derek Queen. Like when you start out the game and the first possession, you're like, oh, Jawan Gary is guarding Derek Queen. That ball is going to go in the paint 90 times. Yeah. And I turned to Bigelow because we were actually sitting next to each other last night. And I said, the Maryland is going to score 40 in the paint tonight. And they ended up scoring 42.
Yeah.
So it was, you could see where it was going to go and what Nebraska was going to need to do to have success last night. And Maryland just hit every shot that they needed to. We mentioned this during after Nebrasketball. You got down to winning time and Nebraska cuts it to 2. And Nebraska's getting either a bucket or free throws, and Maryland's just answering every single time. And like when you're at the end of the game, that is so tough to try to get over that hump. Now, I have a question for you because this is a conversation you and Josh had earlier in the week, and a lot of people weighed in on it. And I was absolutely of the mind that the top 2 just kind of meh, they're in the conference, whatever. We're Washington and Maryland. If you get more games like last night where it's chippy on the floor, Maryland is going to move way up those rankings. I think you kind of hate a little bit.
Yeah, I got that feeling from watching it a little. I think probably you felt more that way if you were in the arena last night, too.
Oh, boy. In the arena was hot.
Really? God, man. Like we said, it hasn't really felt hot in that arena very much this year. So, man, I wish that was something they could have, and maybe they did take advantage of it to some degree. But again, the way that you just got to get a stop in one of those last 3 possessions, and all 3 of them, Maryland did not take. I guess one of them I thought was not a super difficult shot, but a couple of them were high level of difficulty shots.
I think all 3 that they hit at the end were.
I was in the little floater from the baseline was not.
That's a tough shot still.
Not for me, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, for you, the Lincoln Parks and Rec just tearing it up in 3-on-3 basketball. Yeah. I get it. I know, like we're not all Jack Mitchells here in this world. Not even the guys for the Maryland Terrapins top 25 team.
Fair enough.
But they hit those tough shots at the end and answered. But speaking specifically to the crowd environment, for as full as it was, there were times that I was a little disappointed that you could hear the squeaking of the shoes on the floor. Mm-hmm. Other moments, ears ringing. Mm-hmm. It's like, how do we tip that scale a little bit more towards the ears ringing part, especially if there's bricking for chicken on the line. When they missed that first free throw, I don't know if you guys could hear because you guys were doing the watch party, but the second free throw after that first one missed is as loud as I've ever heard that place.
Wow.
That includes getting to the last minute, Purdue, Wisconsin. I wasn't here for No Sit Sunday.
Wow.
But that is, and it was kind of midway through or earlier in the second half. But when you got that first free throw missed, that place came unglued, and I'm like, you're all here. Can you find a little way to get that juice going more?
Right. Imagine you get chicken if they win the game too, right?
Right. So yeah, it was, and there were stretches that it wasn't that, but it would get close. And the problem was there wasn't a stop immediately following it. Every single time the crowd would get amped up, Maryland would hit a shot.
Yep.
And that was so much the tough part, that like you had the crowd ready.
Yes.
The crowd was going to explode. You had a flagrant one against one of their, actually you had multiple flagrants against Maryland players. You had a technical foul. You have all the guys are jawing to the officials, to the Husker players, to the crowd.
Oh,
the crowd was all in on it. You just never got that stop. If you get that one stop and then go and answer on the other end, the crowd was ready to take the roof off the place.
Oh man, that's frustrating to hear. Yeah, I had a little bit of sound. I put a little bit of sound in my ear when I do the watch alongs, but not enough to get a great sense of what that atmosphere is like. And it's interesting to hear you talk about that. Although what you're talking about with the Maryland players just sort of being, annoying to a home crowd, I did feel that quite a bit. And then again, they backed everything up though, just hit those key shots. I'm curious. I think we're both of the opinion, based a little bit on the discussion from last night and then having some time to think on it this morning, that this is not an overly concerning game to either of us. It probably is reflected as well in our NCAA Tournament confidence rankings because of the circumstances and because of how well Maryland played. That said, was there anything, Caleb, that you pulled out of that game that you are like, well, that's something you're not going to be able to do no matter what kind of circumstances that you've got going forward for Nebraska?
Well, that lull a little bit where there was kind of that 2-minute stretch of just no energy. And like it was loud in there. There was plenty of energy that the players were getting from the fans, but Maryland went on that little run and Fred Hoiberg ended up stopping it with a timeout and kind of keeping things close there. But in a game where you're already shorthanded and you've got guys fighting through illness, you can't have a stretch like that. Like almost every little thing has to go right for you. And to have that stretch where there were times last night, and I know he's had a couple of plays here and there. I was just like, I know you're shorthanded because of Berke, but I don't understand what Aaron Eulis is doing on the floor at any time, offensively or defensively. Like it's a body so someone can get a drink and have some water. And I'm just like, that's the entirety of the role. And you had, at one point, you had Aaron Eulis and Raleigh Wooster on the floor at the same time. And I can't remember if Hoiberg was out there too. And then it was like, I know Bryce was out there, and I think for your big, it was probably Andrew Morgan, who he got shafted on a couple of his foul calls. We can go ahead and say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it during that stretch specifically, Hoiberg got called. There's no way on God's green earth that Sam Hoiberg is strong enough to displace Derek Queen in the way that Derek Queen acted out and drew a foul. There is no way.
That was funny.
In this 10 inches and 60 pounds. Derek Queen has 10 inches and 60 or 80 pounds, whatever it is, on Sam Hoiberg, and got chucked out of there like it was Ndamukong Suh against Colt McCoy. Like, what the hell are you doing, Derek Queen?
Yeah.
So he draws the foul. You go to the other end, and you have pissed off competitive Sam Hoiberg, who pulls from the top of the key, doesn't go in.
You don't see him play with emotion like that all that often, do you?
No, he was in it. You go to the other end, easy bucket for Maryland, and then I think it was turnover and easy bucket for Maryland, and then Fred timeout. So it was like, in during those stretches defensively, you saw guys' shoulders drop. And that's the only time it happened during the game. Like, even with a bad call here or there or things going wrong, you didn't see that happen except for that stretch. So I really like that Fred was able to get them out of that. How do you get them to not, like, even if the other team is going on a run, how do you get them to not get dejected within themselves, to not have the body language that says, ugh, here it's happening? That to me is the only part that I looked at. Don't let that be something that can creep back in after the 6-game losing streak.
Yeah. Yeah. That was right before one of the because they had two right together, the media timeouts, that time you were talking about.
Yeah, because
right? When was that?
Fred took a time, and maybe it was like was it the under 16 or the under 12?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out if it was 12 or 16. I don't think it must have been 16 here. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here it is. You had Nebraska had Raleigh Wooster made a layup that cut it to 5 with 16:42. Okay. Then Queen makes a jumper. Then Hoiberg misses the 3. Okay. And then Miguel gets a rebound. Reese dunks it. Then Williams misses a jumper. Queen gets the rebound. Miguel makes a layup. Nebraska calls the timeout.
Yeah.
And they're down by 11 at that point. So they get down. It goes very quickly within a minute, less than a minute, from a 5-point game to an 11-point game.
And both the dunk and the layup were uncontested. Like there was nobody there to play defense on it.
Right. Now, credit to Nebraska. They adjusted. So that timeout was at 15. Let's see, 15:25. Maryland didn't score again until 12. No, even further, until 12:35 on a free throw. Maryland didn't get another field goal again until, oh my gosh, till 10:33.
Yeah. Nebraska came out with an intensity out of that timeout, and that completely flipped what had been happening.
That's really interesting. So they did have a stretch there where they played some really good defense. And you might remember some of the possessions on that. You had Deshaun Harris Smith had a turnover. I don't have a lot more detail on exactly what happened, but then you had a foul where Julian Reese made one free throw, missed the second. At that point, Geronimo missed a dunk. You had a turnover on Geronimo. You had an offensive foul on Geronimo. You had a steal. And then finally they got Queen to the free throw line at 11:25. But that was a really actually good run, and they got a basket at 10:33 and they got one at 10:02, and then again they didn't have another field goal until, oh my gosh, this is wild looking at that, till 5:51. Can you believe that? They had a 3-pointer from Gillespie at 10:02 that put them up by 7. Now they got free throws in this range. They had Rodney Rice made one, Miguel made a pair. Oh, Rice got a layup at 7:25.
But still, that's one in about 5 minutes, 4 minutes.
They were fouling. They were fouling a bit, but they were not giving up easy baskets or, frankly, difficult baskets at that point. And it really didn't happen until that final 2.5 minutes. Now, where you had the Gillespie layup, that ridiculous layup that he made. Then Morgan makes the free throws, and then and then Rice makes the layup, and then the Miguel jumper. Those are at 157, 126, and 39.
Yep.
And that was the first time since that run you were just talking about, Caleb, that they put together any kind of actual offense that was multiple field goals. That wasn't getting to the free throw line. That's really interesting. That is not how I remember that in some ways, to be honest.
Yeah, it was. Nebraska really locked things up for those final 10 minutes right up until you got to the last 2 minutes. And you have the Jawan Gary shot within all of that to keep it at 2 points with a minute 3. But Jawan's shot there was the only made basket for Nebraska in the final 4.5 minutes.
Yeah. Same. They weren't scoring them either. Yeah.
Like neither team was necessarily lighting it up late. Both teams were getting to the free throw line. the officials had decided, oh yeah, you guys are playing really physical and chippy, and now guys are going to shoot a lot of free throws in a way that they didn't officiate the first half.
Right.
Other than, like Andrew Morgan getting into foul trouble a little bit. But yeah, it was, when you think about the way Maryland closed that game, it does kind of overshadow what had happened over like the previous 8 or so minutes.
Yeah.
To where Nebraska's defense had done really well.
Maryland hit one outside shot in the second half. And by outside, I mean 3-point or a long 2-pointer. One single one. It was that Gillespie Gillespie had a 3-pointer about halfway through the second half. They didn't have an outside shot that went in the rest of the half. And they had, they got a lot of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 2-pointers and 1 3-pointer is what they had. And all of the 2-pointers were within 4 feet of the basket, save one.
Yeah, it was basically,
it was interior defense.
Yeah, everything for Maryland was, you're going to get to the rim.
Yep.
And that's just what it was. And they only took 4 threes in the second half, made the one. If you would say at any time that a Nebraska opponent takes 4 threes and a half, you feel good for what Nebraska is going to be doing.
1 for 4 from 3 in that second half. I did not realize that, right?
Yeah.
For comparison, Nebraska made 3 and they took 10 total, I believe. 3 for 10.
Right. Yep, 3 for 10
in the second half. But a lot of misses inside. You look at the basket chart, basket chart, Caleb, that I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
And the thing that looks different between them is Nebraska missing shots inside, Maryland making them inside. Yep. And I'm looking at just the second. In fact, I could pull this up right now so people who are watching live can see what I'm looking at. That is the really notable thing about seeing that. Here we go. Let's see if I can pull this up, and if it's visible enough, that might be pretty small. But if you full screen that thing, you can see all of those the circles without an inside that look like a donut. Those are all missed shots.
Can you zoom that for
Nebraska.
A second?
Yeah, let's see if
I can. Control plus.
Yeah, just a second. I just
whatever tab. I know you probably have a million tabs open like I do.
I do. I just full screen this so I can see it. But yes, here I can. I'll do this. What'd you say?
But you're right. Like just looking at it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm using my Mac, so.
Okay.
I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do it.
That's fine. But yeah, you still get a good idea from looking at that there are 3 shots outside of the paint that are not threes for Maryland. For Nebraska, 1, 2, 3. It's close enough, about 4. But it's really, everything is so heavily concentrated for Maryland, and their makes around the rim. There's a lot of empty circles around the rim for Nebraska.
Right, for sure. So that's an it's kind of a different. Now that I really drill down into that second half, it looks a little different than I thought it might. I'm not sure how differently it makes me feel about the game, but when they made adjustments, they were able to stop the runs of Maryland, right? But it was like when Nebraska got tired.
Mm-hmm.
That was when you start to get those Maryland runs where they put up a lot of field goals in a row.
So both teams shot 16 layups. Nebraska made 8. Maryland made 11.
Yep.
Nebraska had 1 dunk. Maryland went 3 for 4 on dunks. So if you're talking layups and dunks, Nebraska had 17 attempts, made 9. Maryland had 20 attempts, made 14. There's your difference in the game, what happened around the rim.
And for what it's worth, Mexi Fry points this out, and I think he's right. He said almost all of those empty circles was Juwan Gary. And that was Juwan Gary really going after it. And if you show the first half one, he had a few then too, and he was really pushing the issue that first half, wasn't he?
And late in the game, and this was something that you saw because there was so much contact and it was getting really chippy. Juwan was anticipating a lot of contact when he got in there, and credit to Maryland's defenders, they olayed him a couple of times. They because they had gotten into foul trouble. Reese and Queen had both gotten into a little bit of foul trouble, and they just got out of the way. And Juwan is a little bit out of control then because he was expecting a body to come up against him. Instead, there's nobody. And you blow the layup. You miss the shot. And he had been anticipating so much contact that it just got him out of control when he got there. So that is where a lot of those misses around the rim are. It was the anticipation of the contact that just never came because Maryland did the right thing. They got the heck out of the way and weren't going to take fouls because they knew offensively they could answer.
Right. I wonder, I don't know how many teams are going to have two, relative bigs like those guys who play like bigs and don't play like stretch wings kind of, who are going to, because that caused a problem for Nebraska in terms of matchups and in terms of depth as well. Where Nebraska has fared well when a team has got a primary scoring big, that was a little different because they basically put Gary on Queen most of the game. If Queen was in, Gary was on him at the beginning. And I
saw Bryce match up with him a little bit.
When you got two guys like that, you're not quite able to do the sort of the double thing that they like to do inside. Mm-hmm. And they're not, they're not traditional post players either necessarily, I don't think. I guess Queen is more than Reese to some degree, but they're a unique team. They're a unique challenge for Nebraska, I think, that way as well, probably. Now,
yeah, because normally you've got just you have the one big, and if you have a second big like that, they're going to take a couple of corner threes over the course of the game. Reese and Queen combined to shoot 0 threes.
Yeah, they don't shoot threes.
Like that's what it is. So for Nebraska, and especially when you were down to, it was basically that 5-man lineup for Maryland. And we mentioned that out of the 200 total minutes that you get for your 5 guys on the court over 40 minutes, 17 were to guys off of the bench, 17 out of 200. So you were getting a healthy dose of Queen and Reese. And for Nebraska, a lot of times when you have that big, they double down or they make sure, okay, everyone collapse. That's the guy you have to go make sure you block out. Well, Nebraska would do that. But guess what? There was another big dude in there too. So Nebraska didn't handle having 2 bigs very well because so many times it was, why is this guy not boxed out at all? Just a free rebound.
Just killed Nebraska on the rebounds. Nebraska looked hapless sometimes.
They combined Reese and Queen, and I don't even have to look at the box score because I remember this from last night. 23 rebounds for those 2 guys, 22 for Nebraska as a team.
I mean, they were, even if Nebraska was in position, they were out athleticing Nebraska's bigs when they were down there. They were so much bigger than Juwan that he couldn't do the thing he does against relatively unathletic guys and seems to have a knack for those rebounds. He barely had any rebounds this game. I mean, they kept him off the glass. Yeah. I think he only ended up having like 2, maybe 3 rebounds for Juwan Gary. You want a problem.
And one of them was on the offensive end.
There you go. That's a major problem. Why Nebraska wasn't able to stop Maryland.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we talked about last night and that's why I led off with that the real difference in the game, like for Nebraska still having chances, wonderful that they played themselves still into the game. Not having Berke Buchtenjel makes all the difference in the
100%.
World in the way that game plays out.
That would have helped, yes.
And I saw some people on social media mad at Juwan Gary for his 2 rebounds, and I'm just like, he's 6'6". Like he's getting bodies. He's trying to go through and be as athletic as possible. But at some point, someone is bigger and stronger than you, and there's not really something you can do about it.
I also think sometimes Juwan gets in a little bit of an offensive mindset too, and it takes away from how he ends up doing in terms of the signature Juwan Gary stuff. And I think that's how he was during especially the first half of this game. Now, I wanted to point out one other team that may have, I don't know if this is super comparable, but Michigan has 2 7-footers who are among their top 3 scorers. Now, Golden isn't going to shoot outside. He's a 7-footer, but Wolf does shoot outside, and those guys average 15 and 12 respectively. Golden 6 rebounds and Danny Wolf 10 rebounds per game. So I don't know that that's the exact same situation because I don't think they're not as athletic as those Maryland guys. They're also bigger. So I think there's a little bit more comparison to the to the Kalkbrenners and of the world, the Edys of the world, maybe a little bit more than you had with those Maryland guys. So hopefully that's not as much of a problem. But DPM says, a thought I had watching that game last night is I'd kill for a front court like Maryland's. I don't think I've ever seen NU have anything like that, that NU couldn't do anything to stop them. Yeah, you haven't had a dominant. You got an undersized guy like Juwan Gary that you try and get to play like that, basically.
Yeah.
Right? You haven't had a guy with that kind of size and that kind of athleticism on a front court piece since, like, I don't know who that guy is with kind of the physicality that goes along with it.
Well, and remember, just a couple of years ago, he was an undersized big when he had to be out there, but Derek Walker.
That's true.
Like Derek Walker was an undersized big, but he was still 6'9".
Yeah.
So you're talking about 3 inches of difference. There's a weight difference that goes into that as well, in being able to have the strength and being able to body guys up. Derek Walker, if he was 2 inches taller, would have been talking about, okay, this is a real deal big. But with his skill set and everything that he did, 6'9" wasn't cutting it compared to what 6'11" would have for him. And for Juwan Gary, 6'6" against Queen and Reese was definitely not cutting it. At some point, you just say, this is what God has blessed you with, and this is how tall you are, and this is what you're able to do.
And he was still a little bit more of a finesse player always too, though.
That's why 2 more inches on Derek Walker, and he's at least dominating the G League, you know?
Honestly, the guy that most probably was like that, and you got to go back 6 years, I would say, and he really was hardly ever healthy, but Isaac Copeland maybe is the closest that you get to something like that. But it's a good point by DPM, as Nebraska just has not had those athletic bigs that give teams so many problems like that. But that's the best I can come up with recently in terms of what they've had.
And when you look at the front court for Maryland, it's not like that is not what you see across the Big Ten. Like
mostly not.
Those kinds of bigs, and you're not even talking about let's talk even a few years ago when it was the heyday, like when Fred first got hired, and it was you have to have a big. You have to have a 6'10", 6'11", 7-footer. Think about like when Michigan was rolling out like 3 6'10" guys or whatever the hell they were doing, like those types of things. This is different. This is East Coast physical bigs is what Maryland brought into Lincoln last night.
Yeah, in terms of the top teams in the Big Ten, I mentioned what Michigan had, and that might be the closest, but that's not even a good comparison because I think those guys are very different type of bigs than Maryland has. They're more traditional post centers. At least one of them is. Michigan State's super guard centric. You've got, Purdue, what's his name? Collie Wren. He's not really that either. Obviously a good scorer, but then they're also guard centric now. And when other years that they've been kind of that traditional post centric as well. So like, you're right. It's not, you don't see it a lot. Kaufman-Renn. Sorry, I said Trey Kaufman-Renn. He is, I'm curious how big he even is. He's 6'9".
Okay.
But he's a good shooter though. So it's still, I don't really put him with those two guys. So I guess all that to say, maybe that's not something Nebraska is going to come up against a whole lot more, but they could in the NCAA tournament. And you know what that also makes me think of, Caleb? That makes me think of that in some ways. It makes me think of that game against Texas A&M in the NCAA tournament,
where your one team was just vastly more athletic than the other in physical. Yeah.
Yep. To me, that is the worst matchup Nebraska can get, right? And especially if they've got some depth. Maryland doesn't have a lot of depth, and I think that hurt them a little bit against Nebraska because they couldn't keep those spurts up. Nebraska didn't either, but yeah, Texas A&M did when they played Nebraska. Right. And again, it felt like they had a whole team of just kind of medium, big, athletic dudes, right?
Yeah.
It felt like they had them for days. And
well,
that gave Nebraska a whole lot of problems.
And as we're talking about like the conversation on the front court, again, it feels so much different if you were able to have Berkay in the rotation last night. I feel like everything within there, it's not a going through and trying to a referendum on the program because of what Maryland's bigs were able to do. Nebraska was down a big who had played, who would have played significant minutes for them, guarding one or probably rotating on which guy he was guarding out there. And then you don't have so many minutes for Andrew Morgan and Braxton Mia. And I don't know if that means they're fresher while they're out there. Like you would have been able to have stretches where Andrew Morgan is guarding Queen and Berkay is guarding Reese. Like instead of, okay, well, who's going to guard Queen? Okay, well, I guess it's going to be Andrew Morgan now or Juwan Gary. And okay, the other, you've got Reese. Like it just creates really tough matchups for you because of that instance.
Yep. Yeah, and you think about the players who've really hurt Nebraska. Ace Bailey is that type of guy. Even for Illinois in the win Nebraska got, was it Will Riley? He ended up having 17 in that game. That's above that. I'm trying to look at his numbers. That he had 16 in that game, but his average is 11. He's actually had a pretty good run lately. But again, he's that same. He's 6'8". A big athletic guy, and if you have multiple of them, that's going to give Nebraska problems going forward. Now, to some degree, you look forward at Nebraska's schedule, and you don't see a ton of that on the schedule coming up. So hopefully that bodes well for them. And again, having Berkay as a part of the team would also significantly help with all of that. So
he's officially, by the way, the way Hoiberg phrased it is he's officially now day to day, which sounds a lot better than we'll miss extended time.
Yeah.
I still wouldn't expect to see him play in Evanston on Sunday, but the fact that he could still be back before the Big Ten tournament, to me, says a lot about how conservative they were in the initial diagnosis after the Ohio State game.
Yep. You go Northwestern, you got Nick Martinelli, who with now Barnheiser's gone. Nick Martinelli is the guy for them here, and he's getting 19 points per game. He pulls down about six rebounds per game as well. He will shoot some threes as well. So he's their offensive guy. That screams to me a Juwan Gary matchup again.
Yeah, it does.
Maybe a better situation for Juwan than what he had last night. And they're 13-12 right now. They're struggling at this point. If you're looking at Northwestern's last several games, they just went to the Northwest, lost both of those games to Washington and Oregon. They did get a win by 2 against USC at home, but prior to that, lost to Wisconsin at home, lost to Rutgers at home, lost at Illinois, did beat Indiana at home, lost to Michigan in overtime at home. So they've been fairly solid. They did have Barnheiser still for that Michigan game. I think he's been out since the Rutgers game, probably, I believe. So they've just gone the last 4 games without Barnheiser, and Martinelli's doing like everything now. He's the guy. If you can stop him, you're going to be in good shape for Nebraska.
Well, and as you look at that schedule, because the team still has 16 wins, and you look at Northwestern and the struggles that they've had, and you go a couple games when Nebraska's back at home, you have Minnesota, and you close with Iowa. There's 3 that like you have to win those games. Mm-hmm. And then it's just gravy if you can get one of the others, and you're at 19 at that point. Mm-hmm. You know, you're at 19, and if you can get the gravy, you get to 20, and you're going to be in the Big Ten tournament if you get at least those 3. So when I've looked at some of the bracketology, by the way, and a couple of the ones that I enjoy following on Twitter are T3 bracketology and JBR bracketology. So T3 has Nebraska as should be in, and says needs 2 to 3 more wins. And that was before yesterday. But 2 to 3 more.
18 to 19. Wow.
Yeah. So that's where you're at with
18.
T3.
I will not feel good with 18. I promise you that.
Oh, I wouldn't feel good, but again, weak bubble, and you're sitting like you're squarely on the bubble with that one. That's not your missing Dayton type of thing. Like, you are on the bubble to see if you're one of the last 4 in. JBR has Nebraska as a 10 seed.
Okay.
And not one of the last 4 in.
Is that after the game?
This was this morning.
Okay.
That's as of this morning. And also as of this morning, Lenardi for ESPN has Nebraska squarely in as a 10 seed. As a matter of fact, taking on Clemson in Wichita is where he's got that projection. Not even a last 4 in or a last 4 bye. Squarely in after last night's game.
Now, give me some of the teams that are around Nebraska, kind of maybe right below the bubble teams that we'll be comparing them with likely going forward in the next few weeks.
Well, and it's a little bit different on kind of where some of these are. So in T3, Ohio State is right there with Nebraska and I'm looking at just the should be in. And then Baylor, West Virginia, BYU, Utah State, San Diego State. It's a lot of mid-majors. Gonzaga, VCU, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Vanderbilt. Those are all kind of the teams in the range for where Nebraska is between that should be in to bubble.
Let's see. I'm trying to find. So like Vanderbilt is 17-7, 2-6 quad 1, 4-1 quad 2, unbeaten in the other quads. What else did you say? Give me another one.
And by the way, it's a lot of the same ones that Lenardi has for his last 4 buys, last 4 in, and even his first 4 out. West Virginia, Oklahoma, Texas, San Diego State, BYU, Arkansas.
So Texas is 33 in the NET. They're 3-8 and 3-2 in quad 1 and quad 2. I know those aren't the only things they look at, but I think that's always interesting because Nebraska looks pretty good in quad 1 still, even after losing a game last night, and they'll have a lot more opportunities. Oklahoma's 4-7 to Nebraska's 5-7 in quad 1. Oklahoma 3-1 in quad 2. Nebraska 3-2 in quad 2. So that's
a Big Ten team showing up on the bubble. Indiana as next 4 out.
Wow.
For Lenardi.
Indiana 3-10 in quad 1, but no quad 2, 3, or 4 losses for them. So that actually helps them quite a bit.
And a little bit of local intrigue. First 4 out, Wake Forest.
Interesting. Hunter Salas, I should say. And Wake, I'm trying to find them on here just to give you another comparison. And they are right now in the net. They're way down in the net. Yeah. They are 1-6 in quad 1, unbeaten in quad 2, but a quad 3 loss as well. 18-7 overall. Do have 5 road wins. That's another thing that helps Nebraska this year. Again, they now have 4 actual road wins. Like, you look at Oklahoma's resume, they've got 1, right? You look at some of the other teams that are up there. Arkansas has 3. Villanova, who's kind of up there, they have 2. So Nebraska is better than a lot of those power conference teams in terms of road record. They're not, goodness sakes, Oregon has 4. So they're up toward the top of that. And if they could add Northwestern or Penn State to that'd be a big boost too. Looking ahead, boy, get one of those 2 games. One of those 2 games. And then I think I'm kind of back to that feeling of, all right, I'm not, obviously it could still always fall apart, but I'm starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with everything at that point.
So there was a tweet earlier this week from a guy who covers college basketball named Jim Root. And he laid out the record for UCLA based on time zones. I don't know if you saw this.
Yes.
So he laid it out, and at the time UCLA was 17-2 in the Pacific time zone, 1-0 in the Mountain time zone, 0-5 in the Central and Eastern time zones. So I went, you know what? What's Nebraska? Yeah. And Nebraska, by the way, is 5-0 in the Pacific or Hawaii time zones, now 11-5 in the Central, 0-4 in the Eastern time zone. Wow. Two more regular season games and the Big Ten tournament, all in the Eastern time zone coming up.
Is Chicago Central?
Chicago Central.
Yeah. So they've got, what did I miss? Penn State. Oh, and Ohio State. My bad.
And Ohio State.
Ohio State and the tournament. Got it. If you get one of 2, that would get you then up to 17. And if, again, 20 is the number I'm looking at. So that means you've got to find what, 3 more. Then you got to go 3 out of 4 against Michigan at home, Minnesota at home, at Ohio State, Iowa. You either got to win out at home or get it against Ohio State on the road.
Yeah.
Man, that doesn't feel great to me. All of a sudden, I might.
I look at Nebraska's remaining schedule, and I'm confident in this team getting to 19, and then finding between Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State, winning one of those. I'm confident in that.
So getting to 19 is, you mean counting Northwestern?
So beating Northwestern, Minnesota, and Iowa.
Those three are the sort of the tier 1 games, so to speak.
Yes. You win all 3 of those, and you find one from Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State.
They should beat Minnesota and Iowa. Of course, I'm concerned about Iowa on that last game, though.
Yeah.
No matter what their situation, they just went into Rutgers and won. And I know they just lost their leading scorer, but of course, there's almost no chance they're not going to shoot 75% from 3 in that game.
Annoying as hell.
It's just almost guaranteed. You can just count on that, basically, with that game. Discussion going on in the Discord. Matt says, Nebraska's never won a tournament game. What do they need to not only make the tournament, but have the momentum and matchup they need to win a game in the tournament? Well, we just went over the matchup thing a lot. We basically talked about what the worst matchup for Nebraska is, and Maryland kind of showed that. So I refer back to that. But yeah. So I think maybe he's talking in a larger picture, though. What does Nebraska need? And I think they got to recruit a different type of player that they haven't had, which is the big athletic guy that we had talked about. And a true point guard. If you could really, they still never got that. And a big athletic guy who's also with a traditional big, rank masked even, or Mia or somebody like that, who's also can be a rim protector. So you have 2 de facto big rim protectors that are solid defensively, and then a distributor. And then, and then probably one more consistent shooter. You still don't really have, you still could add one more shooter. It's just the roster isn't there, and it hurts that they missed on Griffiths, right? If they have somebody else instead of Griffiths, whether it's a shooter or another wing player,
Frankie
that
Fiddler.
would be, imagine.
That feels like that's the swap you would have liked to have.
Yeah, they did not hit on all of these guys. And, I think they thought maybe Janowski would be playing at this point too.
Yeah.
Another shooter.
That's a lot of guys through the rotation. And Matt also said, why can't they find a way to get a win unless the matchup is just right? I want them to be good enough that a win doesn't require threading a random needle just so. Well, and that's the NCAA tournament. That's not Nebraska specific. Obviously, Nebraska, as everyone knows, has not won an NCAA tournament game, even as high as a 3 seed. And sometimes when you mix bad luck with sometimes bad matchups, and you only have for this program so many appearances in the NCAA tournament, like you look at Nebraska women's basketball. Last year had an okay matchup, escaped Texas A&M, but then it was a bad matchup against Oregon State and what they were able to do with their bigs. It was a terrible matchup for them a couple of years ago against Gonzaga in the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
And this is and sometimes those teams for Amy Williams have looked like, potentially if you can get things rolling from 3, a second weekend team. Sometimes you just run into bad matchups, and that's what it is. So for the men's team, when you add in the historical haven't won one, so you're going to get a little bit of randomization. You're going to potentially get a bad matchup, and then you still have to play well when you get there. It just hasn't worked out for Nebraska. Now, if you can get this team with momentum over this last stretch, get them at 19 plus wins going into the Big Ten tournament, win a game in the Big Ten tournament. I feel like that's momentum enough. Like for Matt, that's that portion enough. That's enough momentum. And then it's see where you get your draw. And hope that it's not someone with a really athletic team, especially in their front court.
Yeah, but I think the bottom line, and I don't think they need to be getting blue chippers at every position, but Caleb, in this transfer portal era, you got to hit at almost, you can't have misses.
You can't
have that kind of a roster.
Multiple misses for sure.
You cannot have misses in the portal right now if you want to be, because the the teams that are able to not have matchup problems are the ones that they're well-rounded, right? Mm-hmm. Because even a team eventually like Texas A&M last year in the tournament, while they were basically the kind of the exact kryptonite for Nebraska, they weren't a real well-rounded team either. And eventually they fell as well. And they had bad matchups as well. Most teams have that imperfection, to be honest, right? Yeah. You look at, anybody kind of in the Big Ten, probably Purdue may be the closest not to having it, I think. But it's hard. That's hard for anybody to say that a bad matchup isn't going to sink them.
Well, in two things. One thing really quick, because Matt asked what's the record for how many years in a row that they've made the tournament. They haven't 90s. Gone back-to-back since 93, 94, and that was actually 4 years in a row that they went 91, 92, 93, 94. And then 98.
And once in 98, and then once in 2014 and last year. That's it.
Yeah. So that's where you're at. So there haven't been the opportunities to have a matchup-free team with whatever the opponent is, because they just haven't got there. Talking about the transfer portal and like hits and misses, I think it's agreed that you didn't get what you wanted out of Gavin Griffiths right now, so you can count that as a miss. And I would even count Raleigh Wooster as like a half miss in what you were hoping for a point guard, like a true point guard, a pass first point guard, a big point guard to go out there and distribute the ball and be ball dominant a little bit to where he can pass to guys that are open and they're hitting threes. Like, that's just not what you've gotten out of this. So if you're anything north of one miss in the portal and those guys are expected to play significant minutes for you, that's really tough. Yeah. And Nebraska brought in a lot of portal guys to mix in, where you have Raleigh has started games, obviously Berke, Braxton Mia, Andrew Morgan. Gavin Griffiths hasn't started, but he played a few minutes sparingly early and then hasn't really seen the court since. That's a lot of guys to mix in, knowing that you're going to have to hit at about 100%. Yeah.
And you can probably argue Berke wasn't a hit either so far.
For long stretches, yeah. For long stretches.
Point in his career as well.
So yeah, because he's been hit and miss on stuff. So if you call that a half miss, you're looking at all of those and you say you're at two misses for your transfer portal.
Who were the hits in the who you say Morgan was definitely a hit, I think.
Morgan was a hit. I say Mia's at least a half miss, if not a whole miss.
He's a half miss as well. Yeah, I mean, and if you go back to previous years, Ulis was not, but Gary and Bryce were obviously huge hits, right?
Yeah, phenomenal hits,
right? And they weren't. Those guys coming in while they were good, we weren't talking a top 10 transfer in the nation for either of those guys. So that's the difference, right? That is the difference. They didn't hit as nearly as well as I think you hope they did in this transfer class, to be honest.
Well, and it can get skewed a little bit because, and this is me who skewed it positively with the way the Fred Hoiberg era has gone, specifically with like transfer portal guys. So Josiah Alec no longer with the team as of today or tomorrow. He's leaving for New Zealand. That was announced this week. Fred Hoiberg talked about that. But Josiah Alec was a transfer, so he counts as being, a former Husker coming in. In the Fred Hoiberg era, now 19 guys who played for Nebraska men's basketball, even if they transferred out or finished their career here, 19 guys went on to play professional at some level. Only two of those in the NBA, Delano Banton and Bryce McGowan's, but 19 of them, whether it was New Zealand or Iceland or somewhere in Europe or in the Middle East, whatever it is, 19 guys have gone on to play professional basketball that played for Fred Hoiberg and Lincoln.
Yeah. And I don't know how that would compare to another Big Ten school, but
it feels like you should have had more hits within that. If you have guys who clearly have the ability to get paid, not NIL dollars, to go get paid to play basketball.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of interesting to look back at the previous, transfer and Rank Mast, I think, was a hit. If you go back, even
Mast
previous
is absolutely
year.
A hit. Absolutely.
Ulis hasn't really been one. But he's got to hit a higher percentage of those. And that's what he did so well at Iowa State. Of course, there were not nearly, the transfer situation was very different then.
Yeah.
In terms of the amount of players available and the ability to kind of pick out your guy.
Well, and I think within all of this here in our last couple minutes, you have to hit at such a high percentage with your portal guys, but you also have to hit at some point on a really good high school recruit that's going to come in
100%
and play right away.
Yes.
Because there's, you want to see what Janowski's going to be, but you see with these other teams, those freshmen come in, and even if they're coming off the bench, they're not starting. They are contributing in such a way that they are setting themselves up for a lot of success if they stay in the program for a couple of years, or those are guys that are going to go to the NBA. And I know you had Bryce McGowan's come in. He didn't like light everything up in Lincoln in his 1 year, but he's still playing professional basketball now in the NBA. Well, he's trying to get back to the NBA from the G League, but you haven't had anyone close that has come in as a freshman that is getting minutes.
Well, you know who it is. It's Sam Hoiberg.
Well,
that's who it. I mean, of anybody who is given multiple years as a freshman into this program where they've hit on a recruit, there's nobody else, is there? Right? No, they lost Jamarcus Lawrence. That Ramel Lloyd transferred out. Cale Jacobson is not obviously a major contributor at this point. I'm trying to think to other years.
You had Ivan Udrogo come in as a freshman and play.
That didn't work out. Didn't work. Denham Dawson, Bradenbach. Wilcher was a transfer.
You haven't had anyone come in as a freshman, get some minutes, and then stick around.
There really has been going to I'm going back to his first year here. Elijah Wood was a freshman. Eduardo Andre. That's it for freshmen.
He was from England, right?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Holy cow. That's
I
rough.
think that's the reason you have to hit on these transfer portal guys, because you're not bringing anyone in and they're staying.
Yeah.
Joe last year, the 6'10".
Joe, yeah.
From Senegal. He was here 1 year and left.
Yeah. Even if it's just one. Here's one, Kevin Cross. Now, he ended up being a pretty good player.
Yeah.
For Tulane.
I liked Kevin Cross.
Completely reshaped his body. Completely.
Right, yeah.
You would not recognize him anymore. But that would be another one that first year where it possibly could have worked. But he just hasn't. That's it. It's Sam Hoiberg, right? He's the best freshman. He's been the biggest freshman contributor for multiple years.
Yes.
Bryce McGowan's obviously
in the Hoiberg era. Yeah.
Shimanga, that was before Hoiberg. So yeah, that would Akola Rope, freshman transferred, right?
Yeah.
He was out.
Wow.
And those are pretty much the two Nebraska non-walk-on. Well, Hoiberg was a walk-on too. So
yeah, Hoiberg was a walk-on.
So that he hasn't hit a scholarship player.
It was a walk-on, and I think got given a scholarship for second semester, but Charlie Easley.
Yeah, Easley, and then he went and finished up at South Dakota. Yeah.
Not that I necessarily think like in that instance he would have continued to contribute because of everyone else they brought in, but he still played a part when he got in there.
Yeah. Oleg Conchus is still in Wyoming. I had no idea. Thank you, Alex, for that update. That's a good one. But to wrap this up, there's not room for error for a lot of misses, Caleb.
Yes.
You gotta have every year, you gotta have a freshman who's gonna be a multi-year contributor, and you've got to have a high hit rate on the multiple transfers you'll be bringing in.
Exactly.
5, 6 guys. If you bring that in, 4 of them have to be hits.
Yeah.
2 out of 3, at least 2 out of 3 have to be hits. And they haven't had that yet. They're still probably going to end up in the tournament this year because Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary were major hits. That's what's carrying this team is 2 major hits.
Yeah, 2 major hits that stuck around for multiple years.
Boom.
That's
young,
what it is.
Major hits. And maybe Bearcade becomes that. I think there's still hope for that.
Yeah.
He is what? Isn't he a sophomore in eligibility? So,
yeah, he's an underclassman, and he should get rink masked back next year.
And again, he could be a multi-year hit as well. Asesian's a junior this year. He'll be back. Hoiberg unbelievably still has another year. Bearcade, a sophomore. Griffiths, I imagine he'll transfer. I assume. I don't know. Justin Bolus, I don't think he's ever going to play a whole lot. Janowski, who knows?
Gotta wait to see.
Cale Jacobson, sophomore. Mia's out. Mast is apparently can come back. I don't know. Some of these guys might be able to come back, and I don't know it also.
Right.
There's going to be one. There's one senior that I'm going to learn isn't a senior, but the ones listed as seniors, I mean, Rank Mast is listed as senior, but I guess he isn't playing. The seniors listed are Mia, Worcester, Morgan, Gary, Williams, Eulis. Yikes.
Yeah, and those guys will all be done. I can tell you right now, those guys will all be done with their eligibility.
There you go. Alex posted a kind of a roster for next year. On who's there.
Oh, gross! I'm not looking at that.
It's Mass, Decision, and Berkay. And in terms of people who have played.
All right,
and Hoiberg. There you go.
Time to learn transfer portal again. 2:00 tip on Sunday. You won't be there because you'll be out doing other things. So me, Jacob Bigelow, and Josh Peterson on After Nebrasketball around 4:30 that afternoon on Sunday on both the Husker Max and I-80 Club YouTube pages. But before then, before you hit the road, you guys are getting a little lovey today.
Yes, we are doing a Valentine's Day special for those who either are lonely or not lonely. They just don't have anything to do on Valentine's Day. And so, because both Josh and I have our significant others who are doing other things or not in town. And so we're hanging out tonight. I don't know what we're going to do. It'll probably get wild. We're not really going to talk sports. We talk funny, romantic adjacent stories. We'll kind of see where it goes. We'll take Q&As.
Talk about Sioux Falls.
It's going to be a fun party. So get yourself a beverage and a snack of your choice. If you have nothing to do, turn it on, watch it with your loved one if you would like, and it'll be fun. Yeah, maybe I'll end up telling more stories about my romantic life, which is always really entertaining from the late 90s. So.
You almost had a hook. You almost had it, Jack. Turn it on, get turned on. Valentine's.
There you go. I-80 Club. Yep, that's right. And no regular show Saturday then. That's going to take the place of that. All right, thank you very much for joining us on Nebrasketball Brunch. We will see you next Friday.
Bye-bye.
Happy Valentine's Day. There you go. I did it. See ya.